Martin Luther King personally asked Sammy Davis Jr. to perform at the March on Washington, expecting immediate yes. When Sammy declined, his reason was so profound that MLK called it the most important contribution you could make to our movement. It was July 15, 1963, and the small conference room at the SCLC headquarters in Atlanta was filled with the quiet intensity that marked the most important planning meetings of the civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sat across from Sammy Davis Jr., two of the most recognizable faces in America, discussing what would become one of the most significant events in American history, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. The march, planned for August 28, was designed to be the largest demonstration for civil rights the country had ever seen. The goal was to bring together hundreds of thousands of Americans to demand jobs, freedom, and equality for all citizens, regardless of race. It was ambitious, it was unprecedented, and it required the support of every influential person who believed in the cause. Dr. King had personally reached out to Sammy for this meeting, because he understood something that many civil rights leaders were just beginning to recognize, that entertainment figures had a unique power to reach hearts and minds in ways that political speeches and demonstrations alone could not. Sammy Davis Jr., as one of the most famous black entertainers in America, represented not just talent, but the possibility of success and acceptance that the movement was fighting to make available to everyone. "Sammy," Dr. King said, his voice carrying the same measured cadence that had moved millions, "I want to ask you something that I believe could make a profound difference in our struggle for equality." Sammy leaned forward, understanding the gravity of whatever request was coming. He had been supporting the civil rights movement in various ways for years, using his fame and financial resources to help the cause whenever possible. But this felt different, more formal, more significant. "The March on Washington will be the largest gathering for civil rights in our nation's history," Dr. King continued. "We're expecting over 200,000 people to come to the Lincoln Memorial, and the entire event will be broadcast on national television. The whole world will be watching." Sammy nodded, beginning to understand where this was heading. "We want you to perform," Dr. King said directly. "We want you on that stage, in front of the Lincoln Memorial, showing America and the world that this movement includes all of us, that we have supporters from every walk of life, including some of the most talented and successful people in the country." The request hung in the air between them. For any entertainer, especially a black entertainer in 1963, this was the opportunity of a lifetime. To perform at the March on Washington would mean being part of history, being associated forever with one of the most important moments in the fight for civil rights. It was an honor that any artist would leap at the chance to accept. But instead of the immediate, enthusiastic yes that Dr. King had expected, Sammy was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful and troubled. "Dr. King," Sammy said finally, "I'm deeply honored that you would ask me. Deeply honored. And I want you to know that there's nothing I wouldn't do to support this movement and everything you're fighting for." "I hear a but coming," Dr. King said gently, his tone encouraging Sammy to speak freely. "I'm concerned about something," Sammy continued, choosing his words carefully. "I'm concerned about how my presence might affect the message you're trying to send." Dr. King looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" Sammy took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to say would surprise and possibly disappoint the man he deeply respected. "Dr. King, I've been thinking a lot about this march and what it represents. This is about jobs and freedom for ordinary black Americans, for people who work in factories, who clean offices, who are trying to feed their families and give their children a better life. This is about the millions of black Americans who face discrimination every single day, just trying to make a living." Dr. King nodded, waiting for Sammy to continue. "The truth is, I'm not ordinary. I perform in the biggest clubs in Las Vegas. I make movies with Frank Sinatra. I live in a house in Hollywood that most white Americans could never afford. In many ways, I've already achieved the American dream that this march is fighting to make possible for everyone else. And that's exactly why we need you there, Dr. King interjected. You represent what's possible. You show that Black Americans can achieve anything when given the opportunity. But that's just it, Sammy replied, his voice growing more passionate. I'm afraid that if I'm up there performing, if the cameras focus on me and the other celebrities who will be there, it might distract from the real message. It might make this look like a show, like entertainment, instead of what it really is, a demand for justice from working people who have been denied their rights for too long. Dr. King was silent, processing what Sammy was saying. I'm worried, Sammy continued, that my presence might allow some people to say, look, Sammy Davis Jr. is successful, so what are all these other people complaining about? I don't want to be used as an example to dismiss the legitimate grievances of people who haven't had the opportunities I've had. The room was quiet, except for the sound of air conditioning and distant traffic. Dr. King stared at Sammy, his expression unreadable. There's something else, Sammy said, his voice dropping lower. I've been performing in venues that are still segregated. I've taken money from club owners who won't let Black people sit in their audiences. I've compromised in ways that many people in the movement might find objectionable. This was perhaps the most difficult part of Sammy's reasoning. Despite his success, despite his talent and fame, he had often been forced to work within a segregated system. He could perform at clubs where Black patrons weren't welcome. He could stay at hotels that wouldn't accommodate other Black guests. His success had come with compromises that troubled his conscience. I'm afraid that if I'm too prominently featured at the march, it might give ammunition to people who want to criticize the movement. They might point to my compromises and use them to discredit what you're trying to accomplish. Dr. King leaned back in his chair, his mind working through the implications of what Sammy was saying. Sammy, he said finally, are you telling me that you're declining to perform at the March on Washington? I am, Sammy replied, his voice firm but pained. I'm declining because I believe I can serve the movement better by not being there. The silence that followed was profound. Dr. King studied Sammy's face, seeing the struggle and the sincerity in his expression. Explain that to me, Dr. King said quietly. If I'm not there, if the focus stays on ordinary people demanding their rights, the message stays pure. The march becomes about the hundreds of thousands of Americans who are tired of being treated as second-class citizens, not about the celebrities who support them. Sammy paused, gathering his thoughts. I can support the movement in other ways. I can donate money. I can use my platform to encourage people to participate. I can speak out in interviews. But on that day, at that place, I think the message is stronger without me. Dr. King was quiet for a long time, his fingers steepled, his eyes focused on something beyond the room. Sammy, he said, eventually, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. In 30 years of civil rights work, I don't think anyone has ever said no to me for a more selfless reason. Sammy looked up, surprised by the tone in Dr. King's voice. What you're doing, Dr. King continued, is putting the movement ahead of your own interests. You're turning down what would be one of the greatest honors of your career because you believe it would serve the cause of justice better. Dr. King stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta street below. You know what this is, don't you? This is leadership. This is the kind of strategic thinking that the movement needs. You're thinking beyond the immediate moment, beyond your own glory, to what will best serve the long-term cause of equality. He turned back to face Sammy. I have to tell you, when I came here today, I thought the best thing you could do for our movement was to stand on that stage and show the world that successful Black Americans support this cause. But you've shown me something more important than that. What's that? You've shown me that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is step back, not step forward. That sometimes the greatest contribution is the one that no one sees. Dr. King walked back to the table and sat down across from Sammy again. But I want you to understand something. The reason you can make this choice, the reason you have the luxury of turning down this opportunity, is because of your success. And your success matters to this movement, even if you're not on that stage. Sammy nodded, understanding that Dr. King was acknowledging both his reasoning and the complex realities of the situation. Every time you perform, Dr. King continued, every time you succeed, every time you break down a barrier in entertainment, you're proving that Black Americans can achieve anything when given the chance. That matters, even when it's complicated. I understand that, Sammy replied. And I want you to know that even though I won't be performing at the march, I'll be there in spirit. I'll be watching, I'll be supporting, and I'll be working to make sure it's the success it deserves to be. Dr. King smiled, an expression of genuine warmth and respect. Sammy, what you've done today, this conversation, this decision, this is the most important contribution you could make to our movement. You've shown me, and you'll show others, that true commitment to civil rights sometimes means sacrificing personal glory for the greater good. The two men shook hands, and there was an understanding between them that transcended the specific question of the march. They had recognized in each other a shared commitment to justice that was deeper than any single event or performance. As Sammy left the SCLC headquarters that day, he carried with him both the weight of his decision and the knowledge that he had chosen principle over personal advancement in a way that few people ever have the opportunity to do. The March on Washington proceeded without Sammy Davis Jr. on the stage, and it became exactly what Dr. King and the organizers had hoped for, a powerful demonstration of ordinary Americans demanding their rights, supported by people from all walks of life, but focused on the legitimate grievances of working people who had been denied equality for too long. In the weeks and months that followed, Dr. King would often reference his conversation with Sammy when talking about the different ways people could contribute to the civil rights movement. Not everyone can march, he would say. Not everyone can be arrested. Not everyone can give speeches. But everyone can make choices that put the movement ahead of their own interests. And sometimes, the most powerful choice is the one that requires you to step back, rather than step forward. Sammy continued to support the civil rights movement in numerous ways throughout his career, using his platform and his resources to advance the cause of equality. But he never regretted his decision to decline performing at the March on Washington, understanding that sometimes the greatest contribution is the one that prioritizes the message over the messenger. Years later, when historians studied the March on Washington and its impact, some would note that the absence of major entertainment figures on the program helped ensure that the focus remained on the political and economic demands of the demonstrators rather than on celebrity performances. The conversation between Dr. King and Sammy Davis Jr. became a template for how public figures could think about their role in social movements, understanding that sometimes the most supportive thing they could do was to use their influence behind the scenes rather than in the spotlight. For Sammy personally, the decision represented a moment of moral clarity that would influence how he approached his career and his activism for the rest of his life. He had learned that true leadership sometimes meant making choices that served the greater good rather than personal advancement, even when those choices required significant personal sacrifice. The legacy of that July afternoon in Atlanta lives on as an example of how thoughtful, principled people approach the intersection of fame and social responsibility, understanding that the question isn't always how to use your platform, but whether using your platform in a particular way serves the cause you believe in. Dr. King's assessment proved correct. Sammy's decision to decline was indeed one of the most important contributions he could make to the movement, demonstrating that real commitment to justice requires the wisdom to know when to step forward and when to step back. If this incredible story of moral courage, strategic thinking, and the wisdom to put principle above personal glory inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to remember that the most important choices we make are often the ones where we choose what's right over what's personally beneficial. Have you ever had to turn down an opportunity because you believed it wasn't the right thing to do, even when it would have advanced your own interests? Let us know in the comments about the times when you chose principle over personal gain, And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the moments when moral clarity guides us to make the hardest but most important decisions.